Welcome back. The Senate's passed the CFO Vision Act of 2020. The bill would standardize chief financial officer responsibilities across the government if it becomes law. Mallory Barg Bulman is Research Director of Finance Process Excellence at Gartner. Mallory, welcome. It's great to see you again. This strikes me as legislation that's maybe similar to FITARA, that it kind of elevates and codifies the job of the chief information officer. Am I reading this right, or is there more to it than that?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, Francis. So the CFO Vision Act really focuses on further standardizing government-wide financial management. And, as you and I know, the CFO Act passed 30 years ago. And when that happens in government, when we reach that kind of milestone, we don't hold a party. We look at what's happened since then. And GAO did exactly that in August. What they looked at was ways that government has advanced in financial management over the years, but also really found that there still needed to be further standardization of CFO responsibilities, better management of the federal financial workforce, as well as better metrics to really help agencies know how they're doing.
It strikes me that the biggest development, especially over the last 5 years, haven't been around for all 30 years since the CFO Act passed, but over the last 5 years, it strikes me that financial managers in government talk most about the introduction of enterprise risk management and risk management broadly as the biggest development they've wrestled with. Is that a fair observation, do you think?
I think that is a fair observation. And one of the things the Act does is it specifies that the CFO is to have in coordination with other key stakeholders, like the chief risk officer, the chief information officer, the chief data officer. And one thing that we at Gartner have found in our research is that leading CFOs really have what we call a constructive tension with key stakeholders. It means that these aren't just dotted line relationships. They really are conversations where you can have that sort of push and pull, figure out what the best customer needs.
I note that a number of years ago when I was at Federal News Radio, I did a conversation with Simone Zickman and Scott Quell. Simone at the time was the Chief Information Officer, the Commerce Department. Scott was the CFO. And it was almost a case study because at that time, this is probably 10 years ago, at the time, an integral, close working relationship between those two stakeholders was an anomaly. It wasn't common. And I imagine what this bill is getting at is that should be the rule and not the exception, right, Mallory?
That's exactly right. You want to make sure that there is a meaningful relationship between the different functions within the agency. Federal financial management and financial management in general shouldn't just exist within a silo. We have found that leading CFOs really have a strong customer orientation, a real understanding of what's happening in the businesses, and they're able to help guide financially smart decisions for the business.
The CFOs that are successful at doing that, Mallory, at engaging these other stakeholders in their organizations, whether we're talking about government or the private sector, how do they learn those businesses? How do they learn those portfolios? And what's the right balance of understanding and over-understanding while maybe losing focus of the CFO responsibilities?
That's a great question. And what it really comes about is really smart decision making about where people are putting their time. Not everybody needs to be an expert in everything, but those strong relationships between the functions really help. The other thing that the Act gets at is meaningful financial metrics. When we've talked with decision makers within leading companies, what they've said is they always use metrics. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have. And when they really have information at a disaggregated level, they're able to see where their part of the business comes into play. They're able to make more meaningful decisions.
And you anticipated my next question. What are the right metrics and how does one read them correctly?
Sure. So the right metrics are really going to be usable. And you want to make sure that the metrics are disaggregated so each part of the business or each part of the agency is able to see themselves. They're able to understand how they fit into the better picture. They also are able to understand how they compare to other parts. The second thing that Gartner has found in our research is they're sometimes forward-looking, really building the capability for forecasting and future looking is really important when looking at financial metrics.
Uh, one of the issues that CFOs talk about on an ongoing basis is their workforces. What is your sense of the current state of the federal financial management workforce, Mallory?
Sure. The federal financial management workforce, like all workforces, is evolving. This is a workforce where there's a real need to get comfortable with AI and robotics to really understand how the workforce can leverage these tools to do their work smarter and faster. This also is a workforce that really needs to understand collaboration. They need to be able to work across silos to be able to leverage different parts of the business's skills. Also, as we're seeing increased telework, there's an opportunity to look for people with this mix of talents around the country. There are pockets of people who are untapped right now, but there's greater opportunities to leverage telework and really leverage workforces in different places.
I mentioned enterprise risk management as kind of the revolution in financial management in the federal government over the last 5 years. Is automation the next 5 years revolution potential, do you think, Mallory?
I think it's part of the story. I think we need to start looking at automation. We need to start looking at RPA. There is a lot of repeatable processes in federal finance that can really leverage these technologies in very simple ways, and it can make staff time be put towards more meaningful work.
Mallory, thanks very much for joining me. It's great to have you back.
Thanks very much.